Toastmasters honored guest. Lessons from the poor side of town. How many of you grew up poor? I agree, I heard you say you did. You know, it's kind of funny sometimes, you know, people say, gosh, it must have been tough being poor. I got to tell you the truth, however, that I believe growing up poor gave me really valuable lessons in life. Because you know what? When you grow up poor, nothing's easy. Nothing. I'm from Dayton, Ohio. People used to ask me when I came to Chicago, what brought you to Chicago? And I would instantly just say, Dayton, Ohio. I was from Dayton, I got to tell you, nothing was happening in Dayton 35 years ago. You know, it's probably not today. I had $100 in my bank account and a jalopy car. When I looked on the map, I said, it must be in Chicago or New York. There's got to be something exciting out there. And I wasn't sure $100 would get me to New York, so I picked Chicago. And that's how I got here. But you know, Dayton, Ohio, I came to Dayton, Ohio when I was 4 years old. We're actually from the Appalachian Mountains. My parents had kind of a rough start in life. My mom and my dad both had 8th grade education. My dad, because at the age of 12 years old, boys went to work in the mines. He didn't really go on to high school. And for my mother, her father was very much opposed to women having any education at all, because they didn't need education. So refused to buy her shoes or books. And so my parents, without much of an education, much of an opportunity, and virtually no money at all, decided to go out and do something very adventurous. When they put Interstate 75 in from Harlan, Kentucky, up to Dayton, Ohio, or all the way to Michigan, actually, to Detroit, my parents decided to move their family to Dayton and start a new life. Now, I got to tell you, that was pretty adventurous with my dad. My dad didn't really have an education. He did not have a trade, per se. The only thing he really knew was cars. And so when he got to Dayton, they rented a little house on what was considered to be the poor side of town. Now, I've drawn a little map here for you. It looks more like a cruise ship neighborhood, I'll tell you. But here's what it was. There was a main street that went through Dayton, Ohio. And on this side of the street, you have to imagine, this was the wealthiest side of town. People such as the guy that's Jerry Office, who started Ponderosa Systems, lived right over here. The Isaacsons, the Phillips, who had the Phillips Industries and the racing cars. These are all the kids I went to school with. Okay. There was a big highway here. There was a little piece of land that was stuck over here with 2 streets. This is my house right here, surrounded by a river and a creek. And this area of homes, most of which had dirt floors, some of which the plumbing didn't work, were almost like shanties or shacks that were over there. And so you can imagine, as a school child, there was a huge difference between those of us that lived over here and the kids that lived on this side of the highway. In fact, it might have well been an island, because my entire world in Dayton, Ohio, for the most part, consisted of this area. Now, it was an exciting little area. There were 19 children, including myself, that lived on Riverside Drive and Stafford Avenue. 17 were boys, and 2 of us were girls. Now, the other girl actually had some, she would have seizures all the time. Her health was very poor. And so it really, for the most part, boiled down to 18 kids grew up in that neighborhood from the age of 4 years old till I was 18. 17 boys, and how many girls? Basically, 1. So when I talk about lessons that I learned in life, I got to tell you, the very first lesson that I learned at the age of 5 years old was this: being a girl was not going to cut it. If I wanted to be a girl, or I wanted to play with dolls, or anything that had to do with girls, I was going to be playing by myself. And I'm not much to play by myself. So I learned to be a boy at the age of 5. Now, I was a really good boy, I got to tell you. First off, we had a baseball team. We had 9 kids on each side. Again, 17 boys, myself, 9 kids per side. We didn't all show up every day, but for the most part, we had a big field that was right here. We had to cut it ourselves, and we played baseball every possible day of the year that we could. Now, I'm not talking softball, okay? Not those squishy little things that girls, catch now. We're talking hardball, a well-oiled mitt. My brother and Chucky Acorn were the 2 captains. They would pick their teams. I was always the first one picked, because out of 18, I was 3rd best from the age of 5. Now, the other thing that I learned pretty quickly, so, I learned that if you were really good, you got picked first, and nobody ever wanted to be picked last. And so I really gave baseball everything I had. The other thing I learned is that boys are kind of dumb when it comes to dares. And you know, you can kind of double dog dare a boy to do anything, and he'll do it.
We know.
Now, that's right. Now, sometimes they won't take up a dare, but they'll definitely take up a double dog dare. And so I learned pretty early that the only thing that the boys didn't want me to do was be in their clubhouses. You know how we had forts, we built them in the trees back in those days, so were clubhouses? One day I figured out if I double dog dared them and said, if I can wrestle you to the ground and pin you down, can I get in the clubhouse? And I challenged Mike Lowe. He was the guy I had a crush on anyways. And of course I did in front of the other boys, because if you double dog dare any guy in front of his boyfriends, he has to take you on. And what he didn't know is I've been wrestling with my brothers, and I was pretty good at that. And so I actually pinned Mike Lowe that day, and I actually gained quite a title for wrestling, which carried me all the way through high school. And when my dad finally told me one day that I had to stop wrestling, or I had to stop winning, I said, I don't understand. He said, look, you have to let the guys win. I said, I don't think so. If they can't pin me down, then I'm not letting them. Just my dad said, honey, I don't think they're actually trying to win, okay? I think they're letting you pin them down. So you have to, you either have to stop wrestling or you have to let them win. So I decided to stop wrestling, because if they couldn't pin me down, I wasn't going to be easy or anything like that. And so a lesson that I learned, again, in life was that sometimes things aren't always as they seem. We also had a creek. And as a young child, we had crawdads in the creek. How many of you ever had eaten crawdad? Oh, they're great. You know, you have to learn as a kid. We always went swimming in the creek, and there were always these crawdad patches down in the creek. And one of the things you had to learn, a lesson as a kid, was you had to learn to avoid the crawdad patches. Anybody ever been bitten by a crawdad on your toe? Ah, you know those darn things that bite you and you be like, ow! You pick it up. But I'm from the South, so I know you can eat them. And so a lesson that I learned, in addition to staying away from the crawdad patches, was that every time one would bite me, I'd pick him up, I'd look at him and go, that hurt. Snap his head, throw it in the water, and put the rest of it in my little pail for later on. They are really good. Now, as I got a little bit older, I got my first job. All of us kids at the age of 10 had to get our first jobs. My job was working for my dad. He had an auto body shop by then, and I was the person who taped up the cars in the auto body shop. You know the silver part? At least there used to be silver part on cars and metal, and you had to tape it up. I would tape the entire car and wet sand it. So what it would do is you'd have to wet sand the car, get the shiny part off, and you'd have to tape all the silver up. At the age of 10 years old, I was paid $10 a car. It usually take me 3 or 4 hours to do it. But if my dad examined the car and there was one sliver of silver showing anywhere, my dad would untape the entire car and I'd have to retape it. Brutal lesson, wasn't it? I retaped a few cars in the early day, but I got to tell you, if you ever want to paint a house and you want someone to come over and help you put that trim on, every time I do it, people look at me and say, man, you are good. I can smooth that tape out to this day. When I would do dishes, if one dirty dish was in the cabinet, my dad would empty every cabinet in the house and I'd do all the dishes. I found only one dirty dish. It was brutal, but here's what my dad said to me. He said, you know, when I came to Dayton, the only reason that we got where we were was because I learned to do my job or do whatever it was that I did better than anybody else. And he said, and in life, if you can learn to do things to the very best of your ability, you can do it better than anyone else. It's going to overcome a lot of obstacles in your way. And so always do everything to your best of your ability. And I got to tell you, to this day, I do everything to the best of my ability. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm thinking my dad's probably going to come and say, now, did you really do the best? I also learned that girls who had the hottest cars in school could pick up guys. Now, by the time I got to be about 16, I was kind of interested in boys for other reasons. And I got to tell you, my first car was a 429 Cobra jet engine, Cyclone, 1970 Cyclone, spoilers on the front and back. It was hot. Bright yellow. Yeah, I had the guys. But a tough lesson I also learned is they're gas guzzlers. And so since I had 2 young brothers who loved to cruise the Frisch's every night with me, we do this for like 3 hours in a row. We learned that anybody that was mean to me on the other side of the highway during school, we knew where they lived, we knew where the cars were at. And my brothers learned at a very early age how to siphon gas. Which just, I thought, it was just a nice, easy way to kind of get even with being mean to the poor girl from the other side of town. But you know, growing up, we didn't have a lot. You know, we got to go out to dinner one time a month, and we always remembered it. We went to a hot dog place. I had hot, conies and root beer and frosted mugs. We always shopped when things were on sale, but you know what? That was okay because it was not only all we could afford, but at the time, I loved going out with my mom and shopping. And as I got older, by the time I reached an adult, what I realized was this. What kids need most in life is love, and that's what they remember. And as long as you take care of their needs and they have fun, that child's going to grow up and never think that they came from the poor side of town, but they're going to grow up with good life lessons, good value systems, and they're going to work harder. And so I always like to take a look at people's background and see what are they made of, where did they come from. And that gives me a really good idea of where they're going to go in life. Thank you.